Hello and welcome. My name is Mark Horseman, Data Evangelist with DataVersity. Thank you for joining the latest in the monthly webinar series, Data Architecture Strategies with Donna Burbank. Today, Donna will discuss emerging trends in data architecture, sponsored by GridGain. A couple of points to get us started. Due to the large number of people that attend these sessions, you will be muted during the webinar. For questions, we will be collecting them by the Q&A panel. If you'd like to chat with us or with each other, we certainly encourage you to do so. And just to note, the chat defaults to send to just the panelists, but you may absolutely switch that to network with everyone. To open the chat and the Q&A panels, you'll find the icons for those features in the bottom middle of your screen. As always, we will send a follow-up email within a couple of business days containing links to the slides, a recording of this session, and any additional information requested throughout the webinar. Now let me turn it over to our special guest, Lilith, for a brief word from our sponsor, GridGain. Lilith, hello and welcome, my friend.
Thank you, Mark, and good day, everyone. Very glad to be here today. I'm Lalit Ahuja, the CTO of GridGain Systems. GridGain is the original creator of the Apache Ignite project that was donated to the Apache Software Foundation and is the commercial vendor behind the GridGain real-time data processing platform that is built on Apache Ignite. Now, within the fairly broad spectrum of data management and data architecture strategies, I will focus my talk today specifically on what it takes to make decisions in real time. With the proliferation of AI and a surge in the development and use of AI agents, the need for data processing at ultra-low latencies is increasing, and it's increasing exponentially by the day. So let's see what it takes to make decisions in real time. First, a couple of questions or observations. One, what do we need the most to make well-informed decisions? The answer is really in the question itself. We need information, and not just any information. We need all the relevant information. What exactly do I mean by relevant, and why all the relevant information? Well, the truth is, the world today is such that any event happening anywhere, whether it's a political event like the elections in the US, or an environmental event like the tsunami in Japan, or an economical event or a social event, any event happening anywhere in the world impacts and impacted enterprises all over. This changed the definition of what was considered relevant, especially in terms of data, what was considered relevant data for an enterprise. And enterprises everywhere had to process events happening globally. So with that as context, let's see what it takes to make a decision, a well-informed decision in real time. As I said, to be able to make a well-informed decision, you have to provide all the relevant data to your decision model. What that means is you really have to be able to process your event streams coming in. You have to analyze all your transactions. You have to collect all of the data from these different data silos within your enterprise and feed that to your model to be able to make a well-informed decision. Now, getting data from all of these different silos is obviously challenging. So let's see if we can introduce a data hub. What this data hub does is it collects data from all of these different silos of all sorts of data formats, all sorts of data types, all sorts of data structures, and makes it available to your stream processing engine, where you can look at your event stream, figure out what data is needed, pull that relevant data from your data hub. It allows you to be able to extract features from your events, to be able to generate vector embeddings, write that to your vector store, and then make that, or sorry, to your AI data store, and make that available to your decision engine, which then allows you to make your well-informed decision. Now, in this whole data ecosystem, there is a lot of components. And every time data crosses any of these components, it introduces latency. And you have, inherently a few different types of latencies. You have latency due to data movement over the network, so there's some network latency. And then there is latency because of the reading and writing of data from these different data sources. So there's, IO-based latency here as well. Let's see how we can actually make this data ecosystem more efficient so you can make these decisions in real time. First, let's try to combine all of these computing components into a single distributed in-memory compute grid. So all of your AI agents, your stream processing, your feature extraction, your model execution, all of that are sitting next to each other so they can communicate better with each other a lot more efficiently. And you get the benefit of being able to scale horizontally as the intensity of your model execution increases, or the number of events that you're processing increases. So that efficiency is introduced into the system. You still have a challenge with data movement over the network and the disk I/O that I talked about. So what can you do here as a next step? Perhaps we can put our data hub and our data store into a distributed low latency in-memory cache. So your data sits in memory. You can always back it up with some sort of a durable asset compliant store, allowing you that durability as well. But then you have, as a result, what you have is data with the disk I/O eliminated. So your compute engine, when it's pulling data out, it's able to pull the data out a lot more efficiently. That still leaves that one latency in the picture, which is really the latency due to data movement over the network. And what I mean by that is, as your compute layer is going into your storage layer and pulling data out, even though the storage layer is memory based, you still are moving data over the network. And this data movement is a lot more prominent, is a lot more intense when it comes to the model execution part of the whole process, because you have to feed a lot of data, a lot of that relevant information to your model to be able to make a decision. So how do we eliminate this latency? How do we minimize this latency here? Well, really what you can do is you can actually combine the two things, your compute layer and your storage layer, into a single platform. What that does is it eliminates that data movement between these two layers, and hence eliminating that network latency as well. Now, all of this can be a single platform, giving you a far more efficient data architecture that is well suited for you to be able to make well-informed decisions, being able to process your events and so on. Or you could also have a couple of different components that come together, or a couple of different technologies that come together. It doesn't have to be a single platform, as long as these technologies are tightly integrated at a more native level, so you can eliminate these different latencies. But I'm not done here yet. You have this data architecture that supports your decisions. What you also have with this architecture is yet another benefit. What you see here on the left is your traditional enterprise data ecosystems with latency across all of these different silos, with the risk of data loss, data integrity loss, and obviously architectural complexity. What you see on the right here is a slightly more consolidated data architecture with one of those modern data platforms, optimizing your data movement across your data ecosystem, minimizing your latency, and simplifying your data architecture. So with that, key takeaways, what did we learn today? Data-driven enterprises need real-time processing to be able to make decisions in real time. To be able to minimize latency and make the optimal use of these decisions and so on, what you have to do is you have to be able to combine all of these different data elements and data sources and types with your compute, which means your streaming, your transactions, your historical data sitting in these different silos, all has to be combined together into a single platform or a single well-integrated technology stack to be able to minimize that latency. And then finally, to be able to deliver business outcomes, AI-driven business outcomes, to be able to make those decisions in real time, enterprises have to consider and have to look at these unified real-time data platforms. With that, I will hand it over to Mark. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Now let me introduce to you our speaker of this monthly series, Donna Burbank. Donna is a recognized industry expert in information management with over 20 years of experience helping organizations enrich their business opportunities through data and information. She is currently the managing director of Global Data Strategies Limited, where she assists organizations around the globe in driving value from their data. She has worked with dozens of Fortune 500 companies worldwide in the Americas, Europe, Asia, and Africa, and speaks regularly at industry conferences. She has co-authored several books on data management and is a regular contributor to industry publications. And with that, Donna, take it away, my friend.
Thank you so much. Great to kick off another year of DataVersity webinars. Always a pleasure. So on that note, if this is the first time anyone in the audience has attended this series, I want to let folks know it is a series. So you'll see the lineup for this year, and I saw a question in the chat about some links. One of the great things about DataVersity is they do keep all of these recorded, so past years and ones coming up. You'll be able to catch these on demand in case you want to see it again or pass it to a friend. But I hope you can join some of these others if any of them seem interesting to you. We like to cover kind of a broad brush, but typically we like to kick off the year talking about trends. I know it's kind of well into January at this point, but always good to kind of start the year of where we've been and maybe where we're headed. So jumping right in terms of what we're going to cover today, I mean, one of the fun things about being in data management and having, being, I assume all of us on the call are somehow related in our careers to data, is that things happen so fast. We're sort of at that forefront of innovation. You'll see some of the stuff that Grain talked about, like really, we wouldn't have been talking about that 10 years ago, right? So really exciting to be at the front of that. But I think what the challenge is of a lot of us who are practitioners doing this day to day is what is hype and what's practical value? What do we use now? What will go away? How do I, how can this actually provide value to my organization or my business, right? So that's what, if you haven't joined these webinars before, I am a practitioner. I'm a consultant at Global Data Strategy. We do this day to day. And I like to share kind of some real world input, at least from our perspective, because we work with a lot of different companies in terms of what we're seeing. The nice part about this particular webinar, this is this topic, we've been doing this for the past, oh gosh, I think like 6 or 7 years now, is that Dataversity and Global Data Strategy partner each year to do a trends in data management report, because we like to bring data to the conversation. We're data folks. So you'll see there a screenshot of the report. It is available for free download on both Dataversity and the Global Data Strategy page, so you can get this and check. I'll show you a lot of the graphs and data as a subset, but if you want to read the whole thing, you can't sleep one night. I think it's like 40 pages or something of a lot of good detail. But this is a broad brush, as is the people on this call, from over 45 countries, over 300 participants, and a really wide range of industries. So I think it is kind of a broad perspective of people across the globe and what people are actually doing and seeing from the survey. So let's jump right in. We already talked about this on the call today with Grain. I think unless you're living under a rock, you've been thinking, talking, experiencing, using AI or artificial intelligence. So of course we're going to talk that, but when we're talking about a trends in data session. However, what I find interesting and heartening, I guess, or as a positive thing, I mean, this is the Dataversity crowd, right? So a lot of us understand things like data architecture, data governance, data management. So really the themes that we saw as from the respondents in this survey were less to do with the transformational power of AI and all the awesome things we can do with it, but more about the concerns of how to govern the data, how to support, the ethical and data use of AI and the data quality around AI, and really stressed data governance, cross-functional data literacy. We'll talk about that word I'm not a fan of, but came from the survey of, how do we get both business people and technical people in the right room talking about the right things, so that, yes, of course, we can take use of all this great new awesome technology, but do it in a wise way. And that picture on the right wasn't really meant to look like global disaster, but it kind of looks a little grim. It wasn't meant to be. But that is the problem when we talk about AI. It's sort of, the extremes on either side. So if you're following the news, right, you'll see things from, is this a boon? Is this the best thing that ever happened? It's going to change humanity. It's going to save the world. The most important thing our civilization is ever going to do. It's going to halt poverty and change climate change and cure all diseases, right? That I'm a fan of AI, but I think, are those extreme, right? Or is it right? Are we really at the brink of something just transformational in our culture? And or is this going to be the end of us, right? This is a risk to humanity. You'll see some of the quotes there. These are all mostly, magazines and articles that, of institutions we're familiar with. New York Times, is this a risk of extinction, right? There's a fun group there in the middle, the Center for the Study of Existential Risk. They're always fun at the party, right? Talking about the risk from artificial intelligence. This isn't new. However, if anyone's seen kind of 2001: A Space Odyssey, what's the big scene from that? I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that, right? Where the computers take over and, they're running the world. So how much of that is real and how much of that is a risk? Or like most things, is it somewhere in the middle? So we'll kind of delve into some of that. If you take part in the survey, we kind of encourage you to. We do this each year. A lot of folks will write in some comments that, we quote out sometimes in the write-up. And I thought this one was quite good, so we're quoting it. So some of the words of the survey respondents of again, as organizations adopt AI, it's really intensifying the need for data management and the need for data governance, because this becomes even more critical for the ethical, transparent, reliable use of AI. And I know we're seeing that in our practice. And not just AI, we'll talk about that. AI is a broad brush. I've done whole webinars and conference presentations on AI. What that actually means, some folks really mean just plain old reporting when they talk about it, right? But in any case, the focus on data really does need to drive a focus on things like data management and data governance. So, and I like this one a bit, and we'll talk more about that, the intersection of just business process with data. It isn't, fancy new tools and AI capabilities without getting that, the foundations right as well. And then, AI and data ethics. And I won't focus deep on ethics here, but I would say even something like governance, getting the right people in the room, talking about data and the correct usage of data, both good and bad, is a necessary thing, not even just a good thing. It just is a requirement, should be a requirement for anything data related, but particularly AI. And there's a lot of legislation around that as well. Okay, so without just AI, and this won't be just an AI presentation because there's a lot more to data than just AI. And so I like this question. We ask it every year, and I will say that the results, sometimes I'll show a year-over-year change. It's pretty similar year over year when we say, what are your business goals and drivers for implementing data management? Insights through reporting and analytics. You could say AI is part of that. But that's been the same year over year for every single report we've ever done. A lot of folks kind of think of data as your dashboard, as your report, as your analytics, right? But it isn't just that. If you look at some of the others, driving efficiency, saving costs. I love that one because it is true. And I think so often we're seen as, quote, a cost center as something like data management. But really, if you're not doing things efficiently, you're really wasting money. So really, we're a cost saver in the organization. You'll see things like digital transformation, also the risk, right? Complying with regulations, reducing risk in the org. Gosh, if you don't have a good sense of your finance data, your HR data, your operations data, that really is a true risk. And then you'll see some of the more positive: customer satisfaction, revenue, product quality. The one I really like is the improving outcomes there in the middle, because I try to be careful using the word organization and not always company, right? A lot of orgs that we've worked with are nonprofits, helping children and families. We've done work with some research, medical research that are sharing data across the globe to improve health outcomes, right? So data is ubiquitous and really can be used everywhere. So, and you'll see that in a lot of these, you'll probably see some nodding heads of things you're doing in your organization, or maybe you're seeing some new ideas that might give you some ideas of how you can use data in your org. So the other thing I like to stress, and will be a theme of this presentation, it really does take a village. And this is one, I'm not showing all the years of the survey, but that really has evolved over time. One of the things that evolved is sort of the breadth of this, the distribution of this graph, of just the amount of different types of roles that are involved in driving data management. This is most of these are, select all that apply. For those who are saying the numbers don't add up, this is to 100. This is what all of these types of roles. What's interesting, you'll see the data governance lead comes out as number one. You'll also see that chief data officer is high. That actually grew 7% since the previous survey. Just my color commentary here, and I say this to a lot of the firms we work with, folks who are data governance leads, is an amazing opportunity for you in your career. I've seen a lot of folks who started as a data governance lead kind of grow into the chief data officer role, if that's your want in life. And I think that makes sense in my mind, because a good person who's driving data governance is really a change agent. Really, you're understanding how data is used in the business. You're getting organizational change management. You're getting buy-in. You're getting understanding. You're getting accountability from both business and IT. And that's why it's a hard role. If anyone here is either a chief data officer or a data governance lead, pat yourself in the back, because that's a hard role, because it takes both the people skills and the tech skills. And not that people can't wear two hats, but those are very different hats, right? You need to really understand the people, the nuance, to drive organizational change. And you're not writing SQL code, but you need to understand all of the different technologies that are evolving so quickly as we started this webinar, right? That is both the excitement and the challenge of being in data right now. There's a lot going on. But again, those were the highlights of this, but I also like the breadth of it. You'll see breadth of it, right? You'll see project managers, business stakeholders. I know that's super broad. But chief financial officers, teams of people driving it. You'll just see that I like this because a lot of different folks are having their eyeballs on data. I'm a data architect, a proud one, and I was pleased to see that we kind of got number 4 on the list there. And that's not a surprise to me, because if you look, and I'm sure someone will bring this up, the surveys on data management, which is broader than data architecture. I'll try to highlight some of the data architecture centric things of the survey. But I do see similar, I see the data governance lead and the data architect kind of being hand in hand, partners in crime, whereas the governance lead is going to be more broad, kind of getting buy-in, driving policy. The architect really is driving the structure and the architecture of the data assets, but does need to have that business view. And I'll talk more about that. If you've heard me talk before, you'll heard me talk about business data models and enterprise architecture, and all of that comes into play here. Little disheartening, and this actually went down from last year's survey, of people who actually do feel they have a defined data architecture in their organization. You'll see it's only 42%. Last year it was over 50%. I think it was in the 60s. Could be that maybe that word defined, right? We use words carefully here in data management, especially if you're building glossaries and things. But even, just starting with a presentation with GridGrain and their, next generation real-time streaming, mixing that with data warehouse, with glossary. I mean, there's a lot. So I think, do people feel they're entirely there? I wouldn't feel you're alone if you're a little lost and confused, because there's so much out there, right? So it could be that. But yeah, data architecture is key, really, to driving, anything data centric in the organization. And I love this slide, and it does not surprise me. It may surprise others. But when we say those who do have a defined data architecture, what has been the benefit of that? You'll see some of the things that we've, kind of talked about: reduction in costs and increased IT productivity and things like that. But of all the things that came out, it was collaboration, people, right? Collaboration with the IT, collaboration with business, or the collaboration across the two. I see this all the time. I do feel that people question me all the time of, is that really true? How the business people really want to see a data model or a system architecture diagram? And I usually try not to use absolutes like always or never, but if you're not getting success, you might be doing it wrong, right? And I'll fight you on that, because we see it all the time. Maybe not always, but generally when we present, we'll talk about this in a slide to come, data models, even system architecture diagrams, data flow diagrams. When you tell the story, a colleague of mine yesterday, on giving a little plug to DATAVERSITY, there was a data architecture online conference, and my colleague Scott Garner talked a lot about using the language of the business, and he's in our practice, obviously, and we do that all the time. And just that difference of the language you use and the tools you use will make your architecture sing, and it will help your architecture, because you should be designing your architecture for the business, not just an academic or technical view. So again, we see that all the time in our practice, and it's a lot of things. It's data models, it's system architecture diagrams, etc. And I just thought I'd call out some real quotes. These particularly were from data models. One of my favorites here, because this is really elegant. You just summed up our organization in a single page, and they were talking about a conceptual data model or a business data model. This is from an early childhood educator. I like that, because a lot of people, we like to say, oh, the business, anyone who's not in IT is, quote, the business. Well, the business could be a teacher, it could be a doctor, it could be an accountant, a lawyer, a finance, right? It could be a lot of different things, and we don't think of that when you just group people together as the business, right? So another quote from the business, maybe a little more business focused. This one just happened last week. We were particularly happy working with a big finance organization. showing data models to, finance executives and customer service reps and things. And their quote was, "This is the clearest way I've seen our business illustrated ever." And I've worked at this company, and it was data models, right? Yes, we overlaid their data. We said it, we used their words because that's what a data model should do. And again, these are two business folks basically saying, thank you for doing a data model because you've really understood our business, and a good data architecture should. This last one I love too, because it's from IT or software development, right? And their point of view is, I've never seen the data from the customer's perspective before. This will really help me in my app dev, because now I understand, I'm not just building an app, I'm building a service for our customers, right? And just that switch in mindset was huge. And these all came from data modeling sessions. So if it's not happening to you, talk to me. We can make it work, because it should. It's how you present it, and are you presenting the right information with the right words? So when we talk about data architecture, I kind of talked about this in the beginning. I don't love the word data literacy because that feels judgmental, like people are illiterate. So I like to say it's not about data literacy, it's about having the right conversations with the business and IT and using the right tools. And I don't mean software tools, I mean architecture tools, data models, architecture diagrams, because I just see this a lot. And I know us, we're mostly data people. We can sort of talk down to people who don't know data, which I've always thought is ridiculous, because I don't know about finance. I don't know about educating small children. I don't know about most of the things the business does in the depth that they do. So it's not that other people are not smart. It's they don't particularly know the words we're using, right? So are we business literate? We data people, are we business literate? Are we understanding the business and playing that back through our data architecture, rather than I've done it, I have, and sometimes it works and sometimes it's necessary. I'm always pleased at how quickly business people do pick up on things like data models. But I'll drop in third normal form and things like that, and that is not what the business needs to hear. They need to hear how their business is working through data. So we have a question about that in terms of what models, diagrams, architecture tools do you use? And I sort of liked this theme. I mean, some of them were surprising that weren't a little bit higher, but the number one and number two were business-centric data models, logical and conceptual data models. Yay, go business-centric data modeling. I've written a book on it. I'm a fan of it. Works all the time. I've found that business people, when done right, love data models. I have seen across the survey years, it sort of switches. Sometimes conceptual comes first, sometimes logical comes first, but generally it's the business-centric ones first. And then you'll see some of these others. Remember the quotes earlier in the presentation of the risk of AI, the risk of a lot of things with data. If you don't understand the business process behind it, or even optimize the business processes supporting data, that's critical to governance, is critical to things like master data management. So a lot of these are similar slices of a similar thing, depending how you do them. Data flow diagrams, data lineage diagrams, business process models, system architecture diagrams, what systems you're using and how does the data flow between them. We in our practice are huge fans of business process models, and with kind of a data overlay. We can say the data quality is bad, but what's the source of that? Who's touching it? Or if we're doing data governance, what better way to get accountability for data when you literally show people their data job in a diagram and what data they're accountable for, or recipients of, et cetera, et cetera. So these diagrams are ones we use. They sort of align well with me. CRUD matrices at the bottom, we use a lot. I'm kind of bummed it's only 10%. Bummed is a very technical term. CRUD matrices, if you've never used them, it stands for what data is created, read, updated, and deleted. We often do those with that business process model, because a business process model in its pure sense is just showing the business process, but then overlaying the data usage. Who's updating this data? More than one group updating this data? Who's the downstream recipient reading the data? Are those folks talking together? All of that could be kind of well described through a combination of a CRUD matrix. I'm going to say that right, a CRUD matrix, a business process model, and a data model. Kind of the tools we often use. Okay, hopefully that helped. Hopefully some of these are the ones you folks are using in your day jobs. But a lot of more thing about a data architecture is some of the stuff Greg was talking about, the data platforms, the system architecture that's supporting your data, as well as the data models that describe the databases on that platform, right? So it's sort of multi-level. So this question specifically in 2024 was, what are the current data platforms you are using? Despite all the claims that relational databases are dying, going away, or maybe folks are stopping saying that because it's just number one usage year over year for the past 7 years continues to be relational databases. The change I've seen, and maybe you're seeing as well, is you'll see here that on-prem is still higher than cloud. It's been sort of switching each year, with cloud getting a bit higher and relational kind of maybe staying the same, but cloud definitely growing, and we'll talk about that kind of in the future state. You may be seeing that yourself, but either way, those are relational databases. Not surprising, because that's often, I'm a fan, you've heard me say before, if you've heard me speak, it's both and. It's fit for purpose. A good data architecture with all the tools of the trade now shouldn't only be a relational database. You'll see here, and it was a bit lower in the loop. So sorry, Grid Grain, you have market opportunity with the DATAVERSITY crowd. That some of the real-time streaming is still not in massive adoption. You'll see there it's kind of 10%-ish. That might be fine. It's a both and, right? You can have your relational database and some real-time data streaming. You can have a relational database and a document database or a key value pair data store, et cetera, et cetera. So, but relational databases are really good for your applications, your data warehouse type or operational data store. They are really good for a lot of the business-centric applications for things like BI and operational applications. The thing that does keep me up at night, and I say this every year and it doesn't go away, so I swear you're all answering the survey just to get me upset, but it's not true because I see this everywhere, is the number 3 spreadsheets as your leading data source. And I see it everywhere. I use spreadsheets, nothing against spreadsheets, but they are a terrible source for your enterprise data storage. So one of these years on the survey, that will not be there anymore, and sure, it will be at the bottom, and I will be happy, but I'm not holding my breath. So unfortunately, that's just because they're ubiquitous, because they're easy to use, because of all the things we're sort of talking about, lack of consistent data architecture and data management and data governance. People get things done in the way they want to, in the way they have to. I mean, to get it done. If anyone saw, and it's a post on my LinkedIn page, if you wanted to go look, I last month or earlier this month published an article with a colleague of mine, Tom Redman, on Harvard Business Review on how to make everyone great at data. And we kind of talked about this very problem of, I think we had Mary in accounting, and a fictitious Mary who is, keeping all the different locations on a spreadsheet because, there's no master data source, and she's doing the best she can. Is Mary doing the wrong thing or the right thing? She's doing the wrong thing by storing it in a spreadsheet. She's doing it in the right thing because she's trying to get it done, and she doesn't have the tools and she doesn't have the support. So a lot of these spreadsheets are probably your hidden data stewards across the organization that are trying to do the right thing, but don't have the right tools or don't have the right support or the collaboration. So before we mock the spreadsheet, let's look what's in it and why that's happening. So, sorry, a little bit of a plug for my article, but you'll see that the other thing that makes it complicated is that it is a both and all of these are valid. And if you're a data architect, you really need to balance the use of all of these. One more call out on this is the legacy systems there, mainframe, COBOL, and that's pretty darn high. That is going down year over year in the survey, but it's between 30 and 40%. Years ago, they were hiring COBOL programs out of retirement to really understand these systems. But and that is the challenge. We're not talking a lot about tools on this call, but that's where some of these automated the data lineage or data dictionary, data catalog. I mean, I'm not one of the younger people on these calls, and I remember when I started my data management career, COBOL was sort of old, and I was laughing that I had to learn COBOL copybooks, but I was working with a data catalog company that automated that. So, right, so you could scan in your COBOL copybooks and kind of understand the structure of COBOL and mainframe and some of these legacy systems. So don't feel like you have to go study all of these. There are now tools to help with some of that, but I do find that interesting, despite years and years of saying some of these things are going away, or maybe they're not, right? So mainframes are really driving some large implementations. So Anyway, that was a long rant about this slide, but hopefully that's helpful in terms of what people are using today. I also find it interesting to kind of look a little bit ahead to the future in terms of what do people feel is coming next. So this is the question of what platform data storage technologies do you plan to use in the next 1 to 2 years? And this is a little more interesting or a little more diverse, maybe. Both are interesting. You'll see that relational database is still number 1, but you'll see that now that is firmly in the cloud and on-prem is now down to number 3. They've switched a little bit. You'll also see kind of, and I know some of these names are maybe not the exact word you'd use for these, but cloud object storage, like a data lake is up there as number 2. You'll see more non-relational, cloud-based, key value pair documents. At least people are admitting that spreadsheets are going to still be there. That's fine, right? But this can be complicated too. You'll see, how do I manage all of that in my architecture? And that is the challenge of a good data architecture it doesn't mean that data warehouses go away and are replaced with real-time streaming. It's now we have real-time streaming, and how do we integrate that into our ecosystem of tools, right? And that's where this slide comes in, and I think this is a good thing. It's a really exciting thing in our industry of all the choices we have. And the way I look at this is that architectures are becoming ecosystems, really. Whereas in the past, we were sort of stuck with, well, I'm going to build a thing. I'm going to build a fit for purpose solution, and I'm going to build a data warehouse or a data lake or whatever I'm going to build on this particular platform. But now a lot of the tool vendors out there do offer really these ecosystems of best of breed solutions. So in the same environment, you can have your data lake and your data warehouse and your real-time data streaming, either in the same vendor or a team of vendors. And that really gives you a lot of choices and ways to interconnect things together. So I find this super fun and exciting. And even just, there's pros and cons to cloud. That would be a whole other webinar. But the way you can sort of spin up things and try them out and your extra weekend time or whatever, and try out some of these technologies, because that is something I would say to you. A lot of us, I'm making some assumptions here, but in the Dataversity, DAMA, DMBOK, kind of crowd, are probably really comfortable in the relational database space. Have we played around with graph databases, or have I done anything with real-time streaming? Have I even looked at data lake, right? So give it a try if you haven't, right? And I think a lot of these platforms do make it easy to kind of spin up something, test it out, and see if it makes a fit for your environment. Doesn't mean you throw everything else away. It's additive. So a little bit on the evolution and some of the options. These are just generic stylized architecture diagrams, but wanted to get a little architecture into the architecture strategies webinar. This is, to me, almost the classic data warehouse. Do I still build these in our practice? Is this still relevant for many organizations? Absolutely, yes. It's not like these go away. You have your operational data, and I know before the chat goes wild, it might be slightly different, pros and cons to each approach. But in general, we often call this the left to right reporting diagram, where you have your operational applications on the left, you transform it ELT, ETL, ETL in this case, and you store it in the warehouse. You may have a semantic layer to slice and dice and have common definitions for self-service, and then you report in a BI tool. I'm a huge fan. We have a whole webinar this year on this with master data management, of kind of building those core building blocks for customer, product, vendor, patient, student, all of the different areas that can then either and again, this is a whole webinar, push back and publish and subscribe into your operational systems. Don't get me started. Just happened this morning at my financial institution. I changed my address in one system and that didn't cascade. I'm sure we've all had that thing. I changed my address and I still get my address in the wrong format in another system. I think we in data management understand why. The systems don't talk to each other. So a solution around that is something like master data management. You have that fit for purpose address and it cascades through all the systems and then can become your conformed dimensions in your data warehouse, right? When I'm talking about a customer, it's the same customer everywhere. Obviously, that needs to be governed carefully because it's powerful, but with that power, imagine if there's a mistake in the customer address, and that's going to cause chaos. So both good and bad. But this we've been, and then of course data catalog, metadata management, managing all of your lineage, glossaries, dictionaries, etc. Still valuable, still helpful. See a lot of these, build a lot of these, either cloud and or on premise. Kind of it's not even new anymore, but another option to this is, more of a data lake house environment. In a way, I see this as the best of both worlds, where it's not a both and anymore. And a lot of this is the tool vendors kind of, expanding their capabilities on a single platform that you still have your operational data, on the left there, and that may be in a relational system. You can land a lot of that either ETL or ELT, where you extract, load it, and then transform it later, right? That choice of, am I going to lose something if I only pick the things I want in my warehouse, or can I store it raw and is structured or unstructured? And then the rest of that you'll see is sort of the warehouse semantic layer BI. But there's a whole lot more, like we heard from GridGrain. Are we streaming data? Are we getting data from log files, social media, video? When we're talking AI, that's a lot of the stuff we're talking about. Again, could be a whole other webinar on AI, and will be, but a lot of it is the unstructured, the real time, the video type things that you'll see, and a lot of these platforms will allow you to do the both and. So then on the right, you can do things like your AI, machine learning, graph relationships, etc. Those are, really exciting things to work with. You have to have that right data, and that's why I'd say the master data still stays. That still should be the hub for your core building blocks of your business, your customers, products, vendors, students, patients, etc. Because everybody likes master data because it's the good, clean stuff, right? So I've heard it all. Having been doing this for a while, that I had one customer that actually argued with me. We don't need clean data because we're doing advanced analytics. I'm like, oh dear, no, you need even more clean data because you're using it more closely, right? So that if you're data scientists or your AI, engineers, or your business intelligence analysts, all would love a clean view of your customer data or your product data, or et cetera, right? So that can be fed into your ecosystem and used both operationally and for your more traditional use cases. So another way, and it kind of was brought up in the intro, I won't get into fabric mesh, the differences of that. That's a whole other webinar, but we'll just say data fabric here, where I see one of the differentiators of a data fabric is that data virtualization layer. So think of a virtualization layer. It's that kind of logical view, almost, and it isn't exactly, so don't beat me up in the chat here, but kind of to think of it a view on top of all of this. So you don't have to physically move the data into a single place, into a single warehouse, to be able to query everything. There are some good use cases for this. There's also some really bad ones. I'll start with the bad one. What I don't like about this is because it's easy, and I've used some of these virtualization tools, and they can be very powerful and user friendly, and they have a great UI. Don't do it to skip all the hard stuff, right? All the data models and what the data looks like and what the data means, just because you can access it more easily, if that makes sense, right? You still have to do that hard work of the semantics of the meeting, of the data cleansing, because otherwise you're just virtualizing crappy data, right? However, one good use case, we had a client that was a university, and the different departments in the university already had their own data warehouses, the two kind of in the lower left there. Why build yet a third data warehouse in this use case? Because there was just a subset of information that was already curated and well managed, and they did a data virtualization across that, right? So you could virtualize across anything, your operational systems, your master data, your lake, your partner data from different organizations if you have the access. That's one use case that I've seen a good one for, because it was structured and clean, and then they virtualized it. I have seen it used in a good way that could have been bad, but it was because of the governance that it really worked out well. There was a team that, we all have that balance of the business wants it now, but we also want it right, and how do we get that right? So the kind of the BI and analytics team would use the virtualization layer as almost a development environment, in a way of, we can take the data easily from the source systems. We'll do some kind of test queries and what can work and play around with it, and they had the access to it. And then when we decided, yes, these are going to be the operational enterprise reports, that was sort of published to production and sent to the data warehouse team. So it was kind of a best, that only worked well because it had really clear governance and guardrails of what we're using each one for. And even if it was shown to the business, it had that caveat of this is some initial, it hasn't been vetted fully for enterprise use. But because they had that, it worked out really well. It was that good both hand. You could get it quickly, you could do some exploration, and then you had a really good, it actually sped up the enterprise data warehouse because they already had the queries. They'd already kind of done some of that hard work in the virtualization layer. So that is that. So those are all some options. Your good old warehouse, your data lakehouse, that kind of is the best of both worlds, and then this data fabric that kind of adds that virtualization layer. So that was a little bit from the survey, but what's next? Where are we headed? What's the next big thing? And so that was asked in the survey as well. The thoughts that what folks are planning in the next 1 to 2 years. There's a lot there, but kind of what I found interesting was, of all the cool things we've heard, what are folks looking at first? The fundamentals, governance, strategy, quality, and architecture. I was heartened by that. Again, this is the Dataversity crowd, so you'd think we in the industry would sort of get that. But that is because we're looking to support things like AI analytics reporting. You'll see all those dots are kind of the newest cool things. So yeah, maybe if this was a Forbes survey of business leaders, maybe AI would come first. I'm not so sure though. I'm hearing a lot about governance from the business. So I found this very positive in my world, because when we're saying what's the most important thing for data in the coming years, people are saying get it right. Get it right so that we can do the cool stuff. We want to do the cool stuff, but if you do the cool stuff without getting it right, it's not going to be as fun, right? We're not going to get the impact that we could have. So, in summary, AI, analytics, BI even are top of mind for most organizations. However, I think what I find good is a lot of folks are understanding that you need the fundamentals to do that. And then thirdly, that the fact that this is a team, it's a team of both business and IT or data people who come with an equal voice to the party, right? The business understands the business. Data folks should understand the business. Yes, the business should understand a little bit of data as well, but it's that team approach, understanding people's expertise and having them all in the room. And data architecture, those tools we talked about, the models, the diagrams, the data models, the data flow, the process models really help with that collaboration because it makes it real. And then, gosh, that last bullet, there's a lot of different platform options. And I would just say start with a use case driven approach, right? You have a lot of tools in the toolkit, kind of prioritize them now based on what your business really needs, and don't limit it to only relational databases. And maybe look at some of these more, the newer things like the real-time data streaming that can really impact your business if that makes sense for you. So just a reminder that this is a series. If you want more about how you fit all these things together and make it real into your data strategy and keep that practical, join us in February. That's what we'll be talking about. A little bit of a blatant plug to global data strategy. We do this for a living. So if you need help with anything we talked about, give us a call or drop a note on our website. And with that, I will pass it over to Q&A.
Awesome. There was a ton of chatter in chat here. Chat was very active, so thank you, chat, for all the great commentary on the side here. We do have a couple of questions in chat that I saw that I kind of wanted to ask you about and get your opinions on, Donna. Do you see data architects and data governance lead jobs being the same role one day?
I do not. I do think they should work well together. I see, if I had to summarize, the data governance lead is a bit more of the business facing, because data governance, there's a technical side of data governance, which will be your things like your data catalog and your lineage and your models. There's also a business side for writing policies and procedures, what do you call it, hosting data governance meetings and, reporting up to the executive committee on prioritizing what we need to do with data. I think that part is outside the scope of a data architect. And similarly, I wouldn't expect a data governance lead to really roll up their sleeves and understand third normal form in a relational database, or how you do a star or snowflake schema for your warehouse, right? There are specific skills for each. So that's why I think they're a team, right? Because there is and that, gosh, like, can and will be a whole webinar, right? There's technical governance and business governance, and there is a handshake between them. And that's where I see the data governance lead and the architecture being that handshake, because you really, I mean, a small org, maybe you have to, but they're just different skills, right? So I think, yeah, I would say no to that.
I largely agree with you there too, but it's always an interesting conversation. Chat just exploded talking about legacy systems. Why do you think there's such a adherence, and why do you think they're so prominent right now or still?
Still, oh gosh. Well, I've gotten beaten up on those too. There are some mainframe advocates out there that are saying it worked well. I cannot speak to that. A lot of it is they are integral to, finance. A lot are running still on some of that. And I know the industry often loves to hate waterfall and planning and design, and let's do it agile, and let's do it. I'm all fan for iterative, but designed iterative. And we can pick on, mainframe that was a very structured approach, but it worked, right? So a lot of those
Hmm.
things are still
Hmm.
working. You got to say, you can. I have an old, I'm probably sharing too much. I have an old sweater from high school, right? my family teases me for still wearing it, but it was a good sweater. It was made well. They don't last as long anymore. So there's a bit of that, but yeah, probably a little bit out of my pay grade to truly understand that. But I think that's it. It's so embedded in business operations. Really is hard to do a digital transformation. And a lot of them are still running. So you got to give them some credit.
Lilith, what are your thoughts there?
Sure. I think I agree with Donna to a large extent. I will say, though, that uh, the reason legacy is still around is because people are still afraid to look at alternate options.
Mhm.
That's one thing. Do they have the right alternate option with the level of risk that they're willing to take? And two, timing becomes a big problem. A lot of these legacy migrations, and I was telling some people in the chat that, in my opinion, relation databases should also become legacy soon. But I think the timing of when you migrate over or away from legacy becomes a big problem. It's very easy to say, let's just go on for another year. And then think about it next year. Why do it now? Why on my watch? Why this year, right? So I think that's the biggest hurdle that you face when you're moving away from legacy. I used to work in corporate IT in banking in my past life, and that's often the reason that was given to just kick the can down the road, avoid the problem this year. Let's think about it next year.
So I'd like to understand why you think relational should be legacy soon.
Oh, just relational databases. I think to a large extent, they have become uh, a limited commodity in terms of what they can do in the way data ecosystems are evolving today and the way they're heading. The flexibility you need to be able to access data, the kind of data that people are mining and managing, a lot of it doesn't have structure. There were some talks about third normal form in the conversations in chat here. Putting things in that box is becoming increasingly difficult, and it's only getting more and more difficult, and people are expecting more flexibility in how they access data, how they manage data, how they work with it, how they store it, and relational
Yeah, and I would,
databases have that limitation.
I would disagree with that. I think that's a clear both and, right? Because I think the number one goal of having governance, I think if you're trying to do your chart of accounts and your finance data, that should and still will be structured. But I
Mhm.
agree with you. There is also use cases for flexibility. But I've just run into problems if you're too flexible, you can't have where's my customer address, right? In a single version of the truth. So I think there's other choices, but I think, and will relational databases evolve? Absolutely. But I think those core fundamentals, I don't see them going away. So we can fight in the hallway later. See who
No,
wins.
inefficiencies and using the lack of structure as an excuse to say I don't want structure, right? Or saying I don't want structure to use an excuse for lack of structure, rather it's the other way, is something you hear all the time nowadays. So conceded, point taken, makes sense.
All right. So what is next on the? I'm sure people had a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah. We have this wonderful message that was sent to us here. What are the best practices for designing a resilient and interoperable data architecture in a multi-cloud environment while minimizing the risks of lock-in to a specific vendor? Like, I think there's probably a webinar and a half that we could probably talk
Yeah.
about that for a whole day, Donna.
Yeah, and I definitely want Good Grain's opinion here too. But yeah, I mean, I would say starting with the business needs, and I know that sounds so silly, and I just do that naturally. What are we trying to do first? And what may, and looking ahead, right? So what maybe we need to do, real-time streaming might not be a need now, but it might be next year. So let's plan ahead. Yeah, there's so much. Understand the use cases. A lot of folks are going multi-cloud. I like to say though also a good data design or a good data model for I'm talking now the structured data that does minimize because you can always, worst case, I know it's an effort and it's cost and money. If you need to switch cloud providers, I still understand the structure of my vendor data and my customer data, right? That's your IP and your business that regardless of platform you want to own, understand, etc. But yeah, I think the rest of that question, gosh, that's a whole webinar. But yeah, love to get Grid Grant's point of view.
Sure, sure. I would actually throw the question back to whoever is raising it, or at least have somebody think about it. When you say be vendor agnostic and be flexible in terms of being in a multiple cloud or whatever, or multi-cloud deployments, at some point you have to rely on somebody, some technology, some application, some system, some framework to be able to cut across whether it's just multiple clouds or multiple applications and interoperability of data. So somewhere you have to anchor yourself to a point where you have these different systems, different technologies, different cloud platforms. GridGain, by the way, has a very well-defined path if you're just looking to be cloud agnostic, as an example, in terms of managing your data. And we can go into those details offline as well. But the question is, at what point do you want to have that level of flexibility? How far do you want to go down the stack for that flexibility? And keep in mind, all of it comes at a cost. So you just have to balance that out as well.
I love that answer, Lalit, because this is something that I've been thinking about for years. Like, there's like this weird trade-off between vendor lock-in, but having a good working and supportive relationship with somebody who's providing you a service is one thing. Like, how do you trade off? I'm a completely, this is my stack. I have one vendor, and if they go away, oh my gosh, or if our contract sours, oh my gosh. But where's the trade-off there? Like, you want to diversify your architecture, but like, I have a good working relationship with this vendor, so I kind of want to keep working with them. I think there's a lot to think about there, and I don't think that's an easy answer. It's nice to see tool vendors out there um, being aware and being agnostic, like GridGain in that respect, but lots of vendors as well. So yeah, a fascinating thing to think about. What are your thoughts on security and privacy considerations while archiving data? I think this will be our last question too.
Oh, wow. Okay. Absolutely. You'll see that's why data governance was number one on most people's kind of brain for going further. I'm a fan of a data model for some of that, of which of your critical data elements need to really be PII or personal private. I think that also if you kind of picture in your brain even that data gosh, I can't data lakehouse environment. Remember that security goes across all of that. I remember have one quote of, we were talking about personal credit card information that was in a warehouse, and one of the junior developers basically said, "Oh, it's okay. I put all that just out in the cloud so I can put it in the sandbox." And I think everyone just freaked because putting it in the sandbox, it doesn't protect it. It's actually the worst, right? But it doesn't matter what area of the platform it's on, it still needs to be protected through it. So I think things like data catalog, data lineage that can help discover some of that are some of the huge improvements we have from years ago. But I think also designing it first. So it's a bit of both top down, understanding because I've also seen companies just been kind of, you call it stymied. They're so afraid of PII, they don't do anything. So really being clear through governance of what we can share and what we can't really help sometimes break that iceberg there. But also making sure that that's tracked throughout the architecture through a lot of these tools, data catalog, data modeling, data lineage type things.
May I add
Awesome.
one
Well,
quick
thank
thing to
you.
this, Mark? Very
30
quickly,
seconds. Yeah.
30 seconds. You know, two things to keep in mind. One, what's happening with TikTok today, what's happening with Meta and people using information in any way possible to gain advantage. And two, data sovereignty. That's become a big thing we see a lot with our customers in the banking space. When you put these two things together, it's very obvious. Security and privacy have to be there anytime you're looking at architecting data or working with it.
Data sovereignty is a great call out. And thank you so much for that answer. And thank you, Donna. And thank you, Lalit, for today's wonderful presentation. That's all that we have time for today. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, chat, for being so electric as always. That was absolutely amazing. We'll have the presentation out within a couple of business days for everybody who may have missed some pieces or want to share the recording with colleagues. And everybody have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.